Welcome to part 2 of the stage analysis weekend video. This part of the video I'm going to cover some of the stage 2 breakouts this week, because there was a fair few actually. Considering the market had a negative week, there's actually quite a number of stage 2 breakouts on strong relative volume due to the large amount of earnings this week, a lot of earnings gap moves, etc. And then in the final part of the video, I'm going to look into the US Watchlist stocks from the weekend scans. So some of those would have already been covered in the earlier video with the look at the gold miners, so I won't go through all of them. I'll just go through some of the more relevant ones. But okay, starting with a few of this week's stage 2 breakout attempts, and a few that are potentially getting close to their stage 2 breakout level. So NRDS, first one up, I highlighted this a little bit earlier in the week on Twitter. So you can see it's been basing. This is a weekly chart. You can see it's been basing since around February. Start to see that change of behavior through the May move. So you can see on the moves down here, the swings gradually got bigger until we started to move back up towards that declining 30-week moving average, which started to come in late May there. So that moves us into potentially the start stage 1 type behavior, pull back as you would expect at the start of a early stage 1. You get the test. So we have a selling climax, automatic rally, secondary test type move. So classic Wyckoff moves at the start of the structure that often defines the start of a stage 1 base structure. Obviously, you can define some of the earlier characteristics as part of the base as well, but we focus on this area here. Once we get that initial selling climax, automatic rally, secondary tests, that's the key to mark the start of the base that we're looking at. And that doesn't always give you the start of the stage 1 base sometimes until you get that first move through the 30-week moving average. Sometimes you wouldn't consider it in stage 1 until this point. This point in here, you would still consider it still in stage 4, and then you start to move into stage 4B minus, and then actually start to move into stage 1 type behavior. And then the whole base structure starts to be considered as the broader part of stage 1, and even further back so a lot of a stage 1 base structure is obviously actually developed while the stock is still in stage 4, and you might only get the final part of the structure that actually highlights it as stage 1. So until that point, it can still be unclear whether it's a redistribution base within a stage 4 decline that's just going to make a continuation breakdown to new lows. So until you start getting that change of behavior, you start to get the moving averages moving back in order, 10-week crossing back over the 30-week, etc. It's not always clear that it's stage 1 until that point. So if we drop down to the daily chart on this, so we had earnings on this one, I believe, on the second there. So you can see here the gap up move that it had on Thursday, a really strong move from the close up and opened up 20%, and then followed through strongly through the day to close up 38% on the day. So a huge breakout move on earnings. You can see the entirety of the base structure here as it's gone through. This is the selling climax, automatic rally part. So we've had number of higher lows as it's broke out, and then a heavy volume move to make the stage 2 breakout attempt. And on Friday, it managed to hold the base above the top of the range. So 50-day moving average is still not quite above that 200-day moving average yet. So still got a little bit more work to do. This is quite a young stock, as you can see, only IPO'd back at the end of October last year. So currently, we're just getting an early attempt into stage 2 with more than 3 times the average weekly volume, relative strength starting to move out from here. So it's in promising position, but we'll see how that one develops. JCI, this is another one that I highlighted on the public Twitter the other day. So it's had a stage 2 breakout attempt this week. Again, if we drop into the daily chart here, you can see the strong move up on Friday, 5.66% on the day. Volume wasn't exactly exceptional though. It's quite quiet on the volume front. You can see the breakout move on Thursday into Friday there. So still got the short-term moving averages in the wrong order here. You've got the 21-day and the 50-day moving averages here are still below this 200-day, this red 200-day moving average. If we go back to the weekly chart here, you can see the 30-week moving average is just flattening, potentially starting to turn. The 10-week moving average has crossed above it. So it has moved out into stage 2 with relative strength outperforming the S&P 500 here, strongly above a flattening zero line. And the volume has been increasing for the last few weeks or so as it's moved higher back up out of the base. So definitely a interesting looking one on this, and did have a really decent stage 2 advance previously from back in 2020. So made a stage 2 breakout through this point here, July sort of time back in 2020, and then had a really strong stage 2 advance all the way up. So over 100% move, 125% move before topping out in stage 3. And as I said, with the stage 1 base, with a stage 3 base, you obviously get a lot of that stage 3 structure actually builds while the stock is still in stage 2. So up until this change of behavior through here, till we start getting this breakdown through this 30-week moving average, you would still, if you're just looking at the chart from the left-hand side of this line, you'd still be considering it stage 2. You might be starting to think that that's stage 2B, stage 2B minus at that point, starting to look a little bit dodgy there with a double top and starting to roll over. So you need to see that change of behavior, and that's when we can start to identify it clearly as stage 3. As you can see, a lot of if you've got a head and shoulders pattern, for example, not much of a right shoulder on that one, but a lot of that actually developed during the stage 2 advance, and much the same with the stage 1. So you get you can see a lot of this base structure in this one, for example, has developed during stage 4. That was still stage 4 there. So you don't start to identify as stage 1 until this point. So more than half of the base structure that we can see here is actually, before it's broken out, was actually formed within stage 4. So that's where I think a lot of people can get confused with stage analysis, but it can be quite simple. You've just got to learn to understand that a lot of the base structure actually develops while it's still in the previous stage. So CROX, so CROX. So this again had a huge move through the 2020. It's one of the favourites through 2020, 2021 advance. Just kept going up while the rest of the market was falling over in 2021. So you can see barely any closes below that 10-week moving average until we started to get up into the September, October time in 2021. So really strong advance, and then we got that change of behavior move started to identify. You can see the head and shoulders type pattern developing at that point, and then started to break down into stage 4 here. So again, up until this change of behavior, up until this point here, you didn't know till this significant bar week here this week that it was in stage 3. You might have some inklings, but if you draw a line down through that point before December there, you see it still looks like stage 2 until that point. Once you get that, you need to wait for that change of behavior. You can measure it by the swings. You can see all the different swings here. You start to get a little bit of a change here, but then this was a much deeper swing, and that's when you start to know that it's potentially topping, and then you're looking for any rallies back, and you can potentially start to consider shorting it, or if you're still holding at that point, exiting there. So at the moment, CROX is only just attempting to break out into stage 2. You can see it had some strong relative volume this week, but it didn't make a convincing breakout. So you can see it was only just popping above the top of the stage 1 base structure. So this is one of those that's had a V bottom and then a tight base structure. So I talked about this on earlier videos in the year, that there was going to be a good chance we were going to get a lot of stage 1 base structures that looked like this, where you had a deep stage 4 sharp decline, V recovery, and then a higher base structure developing. So this is what they look like in real time. So at the moment, we're looking for this to make a continuation. We want the volume to continue to be strong. Ideally, if it does break out, to be stronger, but it is testing that stage 2 breakout level. If we look at it on the daily basis here, you can see that it's just crossing above. So needs to do a little bit more, but it has had a strong move over the last 2 days following, looks like, earnings results there on Wednesday, late on Wednesday evening. So another one that came up in the watch list this week is RYAM. So it had a big stage 2 breakout, so more than 3 times the average weekly volume here. So you can see compared to recent volume, dramatic volume there in that one, popped it up through the stage 2 breakout levels, turned the 30-week moving average higher there, just but it's obviously extremely extended in the short term. If we look at it on the log chart here, so you can see it's actually pushed up and out, gapped up through that 200-day moving average. We get free ATR candles on. You can see it's pushed out of the free ATR level here and actually run above that for a few days. So probably going to need to see this consolidate for a while, come back in a little bit. But if it does, you don't want to see it. You want to see it hold in that significant bar range there. So it's your gap up bar there. So you wouldn't want to see it come much below this 5.5 kind of range in here. Ideally, the higher it consolidates, the better. POD, another breakout this week into stage 2, another really strong move, more than 2 times the average volume there. You can see relative strength moving off to new highs ahead of the price action. You can see the price action still at this point hasn't actually broke out to new highs, but the relative strength has. So massive base on this one, but a little bit choppy compared to others that we've been looking at. So if you look at this on a log chart here, big gap up move here. So huge move on the day, massive significant bar on strong relative volume. So we want to see that strong relative volume continue, or if it does start to pull in, we want to see the volume lighten up if it consolidates. So any consolidation now with a gap up bar like this, we want to see it obviously consolidate in the upper half of this bar. So somewhere in this kind of range probably. Number one that we talked about last week, actually breaking out into stage 2, but I just wanted to highlight again is RMBS. So this had a follow through week, so to new highs. Just wanted to highlight that as some volume came in this week. TEX also breaking out into stage 2 this week. You can see another inverse head and shoulders type bottom on this one. The right shoulder was actually smaller than the left shoulder, so it's had a big move already to move up into stage 2 there. You can see the run up to stage 2 was already a 30+% move, and then it's followed through, so it's already up 45% from the swing. So could need to back up a bit, pause. So if it does pull back in a bit, then you'd want to see any kind of backup move hold above the previous stage 1 base structure, potentially start to build, and that could give you a secondary entry point develop in the backup range. Again, if we look at the daily chart on this, you can see the range a little bit more clearly. So again, a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders on this one. Is that all of them? Maybe through. Okay. Starbucks. Right. Sorry, my order's getting out of order there. So Max also attempting to move out into stage 2, but very early. You can see the 30-week moving average is still declining in this one, and the 10-week moving average is still below the 30-week moving average. So potentially, although this could be considered in early stage 2, it's very early, a lot of resistance, deep stage 4 decline here. So this one could need a little bit more time to consolidate within the range. UTHR also made a stage 2 breakout attempt this week, continuation breakout in this one though. It did already make a stage 2 breakout back through this significant bar here. It's been consolidating in the backup range and dipped below for multiple months now. We've got 4 or 5 months there, making a continuation breakout this week. QNST, that's another one of interest, starting to push towards the stage 2 breakout level here. So testing that level, volume up on the week. So we can see a follow through move in this one. You want to see more than 2 times the average weekly volume, then that potentially could push that up into stage 2. We have got some overhead resistance in this one in the range, so potentially you'd be looking for, if it does break out, for it to develop within that kind of range. Starbucks, obviously, I've highlighted this multiple times. It did attempt, it was an early stage 2 breakout attempt here, but reversed back strongly back into the range, so broadened out the stage 1 base structure. So at the moment, it didn't fail low, it didn't break back below the investor stop loss zone. So although it pulled back into the range, you could potentially still consider this one in stage 2 now that it's reversed back up again. But obviously, if you want to be more even more sure, then obviously a continuation breakout through this level here and on some stronger relative volume ideally. But you can see the relative strength throughout has continued to outperform the S&P 500, and the zero line has flattened out now and starting to turn up. So it is potentially in early stage 2 still, but a little bit more work to do there. And then PTC, this is another one I wanted to highlight. So this is on watch for a stage 2 breakout attempt. You can see it did have an early attempt back here, but again fell back into the range. This one did start to break back below. So if you did have an investor stop in this one, it would have stopped you out in this area here. You would have got stopped out through here, and then it's coming back up again. So we've now got one of these staggered broadening stage 1 base structures. So you have the initial structure, failed breakout, it's come back into the range, so we now broaden the structure. So this is sometimes the stage 1 base it doesn't have clear defined levels. It takes a little bit of you can get a little bit of variance where you get failed, you get up thrusts at the top of the range and shakeouts at the bottom of the range. So sometimes the range needs to broaden, and in this case that's what's happened. So we're now got a new level to watch here up at this, what's that, 126.88. So a clear strong move through 127, and this is adjusted data on strong relative volume. Again, ideally more than 2 times the average weekly volume would push that up and out into stage 2. You see relative strength is already outperforming at new highs ahead of the price action, so it is in position to potentially break out, but obviously a little bit more work to do here. But did have that strong reversal move on Thursday there on that, you can see on the daily chart.